Welcome back. This is the explainer for Section 6 of the PNJ Group's ASC 606 series. We have finally made it to the ultimate payoff. Step 5, recognize revenue. In Step 4, we did all the heavy lifting of allocating the transaction price. Now we actually get to determine when we count the money. This is the moment all that hard accounting logic translates into recognized revenue. Think of Step 5 a bit like a detective's decision tree. Here is our roadmap. We'll start with the transfer of control, look at overtime recognition criteria, jump into point-in-time indicators, cover measuring overtime progress, and wrap up with licenses of intellectual property. Let's get right into it.
Part 1. The transfer of control. This really is the foundational rule of Step 5.
So, revenue is recognized the exact moment control of a promised good or service transfers to your customer. But here's the million-dollar question you always have to ask. Does that control transfer at a single point in time, or does it happen gradually over time? Getting this right is absolutely critical. Seriously, imagine applying a point-in-time method to a massive 3-year construction project. You'd literally record 0 revenue for 36 months, and then boom, you'd show a gigantic, unnatural spike on the very last day. It would completely distort the company's financial health and totally mislead anyone looking at the books.
To prevent those kinds of wild distortions, ASC 606 provides a specific path. Let's look at the overtime recognition criteria, or our 3 OT tests.
Okay, we have 3 specific tests here. And the best part? You don't need to pass all of them. If your contract meets just one of these criteria, you qualify for overtime recognition. First up, OT1. This is simultaneous receipt and consumption. Basically, the customer receives and uses the benefits as you do the work. Think of a software subscription or payroll processing. They are benefiting day by day. Next is OT2, where the customer controls the asset as it's being created. A classic example, building a house on a customer's own land. They control that structure as it goes up, right? Even before the roof is firmly on. And finally, we have OT3, no alternative use plus a right to payment. You see this a lot in custom manufacturing. Say you're building a highly specialized, unique asset for a specific buyer. You can't just turn around and sell it to someone else. Plus, your contract legally guarantees you'll get paid for the work you've done to date if they cancel. That's OT3.
But what if you run your contract through those 3 tests and none of them apply? Well, we naturally fall into the point-in-time bucket.
Since we are in the point-in-time bucket, we have to play detective and find the exact moment control transfers. ASC 606 gives us a set of indicators for this. We look for things like, when does the entity have a present right to payment? When does the customer actually get legal title or physical possession? Have the significant risks and rewards transferred? Has the customer formally accepted the asset? Now, keep in mind, this isn't a rigid checklist. No single bullet point here is a total deal breaker. You have to look at the whole picture and evaluate them together. For most straightforward product sales, several of these indicators will align perfectly at the exact same moment, which is usually simple delivery.
Let's jump back to those obligations that did pass our overtime tests. We need a way to track that overtime journey by measuring our progress.
You have to pick a measurement method and apply it consistently. We essentially have 2 categories here. On one side, output methods. These look at actual, tangible results, like units delivered or milestones reached. These are fantastic when the value transferred is directly measurable. On the flip side, we have input methods. These focus on the effort it took, things like labor hours or cost to cost. You'll use this a lot in complex construction or service contracts where it's really tough to measure the output as you go. But hey, a quick word of warning from the standard. Whichever method you choose, it absolutely must faithfully depict your performance. So if you're using an input method based on cost incurred, you have to exclude any wasted resources or inefficiencies. Why? Because wasting materials doesn't transfer any actual value to your customer, so it definitely shouldn't trigger revenue recognition.
Let's make this concrete with a little bit of math using that cost-to-cost method. Imagine a construction scenario. We've got a total contract price of $500,000. Our estimated cost to get the job done, $400,000. Now, let's say so far we've incurred $200,000 in costs. A little quick division, $200,000 divided by our $400,000 estimate tells us we are exactly 50% complete. And because we are 50% complete, we get to recognize 50% of the total contract price. So half of $500,000 means we recognize $250,000 in revenue to date. But hold on a second. Notice what we've actually billed the customer so far, only $220,000.
Well, that leaves us with a gap, exactly $30,000. We recognize $250,000 in revenue, but we only invoice them for $220,000. And trust me, as any accountant will tell you, a $30,000 difference is definitely not a rounding error. It's a very specific line item.
That $30,000 is a contract asset. This basically represents revenue the company has earned the right to because, they did the work, but they don't quite have an unconditional right to bill for it yet. Now, this is a really important distinction. A contract asset is not the same thing as a standard accounts receivable. It kind of sits in waiting. It only transforms into an accounts receivable once that right to payment becomes legally unconditional, which usually happens when you hit a specific milestone in the contract.
All right, moving on to our final branch of the decision tree, licenses of intellectual property and the special rules that apply.
ASC 606 treats intellectual property differently depending on the exact nature of the right you're granting. We have to split this into two ideas. First is a right to use IP. This means the customer gets the intellectual property exactly as it exists right in that moment. The value is delivered immediately, and they don't need any further effort from the seller. Think of a perpetual license for a static version of a software program. Because the seller can just walk away with no ongoing obligations, this is recognized at a point in time, the exact moment it's delivered. On the flip side, we have a right to access IP. This means the value the customer gets is totally dependent on the seller's ongoing activities. A fast food franchise license is the perfect example here. The franchisor has to continuously maintain the brand's reputation for the franchisee to actually get value out of it. Because of that ongoing effort, this revenue is recognized over time.
Now, here is a really fascinating twist when it comes to IP licenses, royalties. If your IP license involves sales-based or usage-based royalties, you literally throw out the general variable consideration constraint we talked about in earlier steps. Yeah, we don't estimate or guess here. Instead, we just wait. You only recognize those royalties when the subsequent sale or usage actually happens, or when the performance obligation is satisfied, whichever comes later.
And just like that, we've wrapped up step 5. You can determine point in time versus overtime, calculate progress, and even handle tricky IP rules. But before we go, I want to leave you with a slightly provocative thought. You know how to recognize revenue for standard promises now, but what happens when you're just the middleman? What if you're selling goods on behalf of someone else? Do you recognize the whole massive sale, or do you just recognize your tiny commission? That one question changes everything, and it perfectly sets the stage for our next explainer on special topics, where we'll unravel principal versus agent scenarios, warranties, and returns. Keep that curiosity fired up, and I'll catch you in the next one.